In a world where trade agreements hang by a thread, tensions are rising dramatically between Canada and the United States. Just as Washington escalates its rhetoric, insisting it can do without Canada, Ottawa fires back with a defiant proclamation. Alaska's survival hinges on its neighbor to the north. Allegations are swirling that British Columbia's leader plans to impose tariffs on American trucks crossing the border to Alaska, sending shockwaves through Washington as President Trump backpedals on previous tariff decisions. The potential for a looming trade war could turn the economic landscape upside down. With whispers of tougher tariffs aimed at dairy and lumber, the stakes are higher than ever. But could Canada truly sever access for U.S. routes to Alaska? The ramifications would reach far beyond mere economics. Trump's proposed 25% tariffs, combined with British Columbia's retaliation, could ignite one of the largest economic confrontations the two countries have ever faced. The suspense is palpable. Will Canada take the plunge, and how will the U.S. respond? Recent reports suggest that British Columbia aims to impose increased costs on commerce destined for Alaska. The shakeup has garnered major attention, especially after the Alaska Beacon highlighted potential new fees for American trucks venturing northward. Is this a genuine strategy, or could it be mere posturing? Many ponder the possibility that Trump's aggressive tariff threats have overlooked a crucial fact. Alaska is geographically isolated from the mainland U.S., with routes through Canada being the only practical option. As conversations blaze on social media, questions emerge. Could this trade war disrupt critical supply chains? With highways and railroads connecting hundreds of millions of dollars in trade each year, a chokehold on these routes could spell disaster for American businesses. The discourse grows ever more intense. Is Canada ready to risk it all in retaliation? Or is this bold stance simply a leverage play? Recent tariff disputes have ignited emotions, revealing a new front in U.S.-Canada relations. Historically, these close neighbors have wrangled over automotive and agricultural exports, but the strategic implications of the Alaska route escalate the conflict even further. Can Trump manage to quell the storm brewing in the north, or will British Columbia's threats gain real traction? As the leaders confront this high-stakes game of diplomacy, Alaska's vital role in U.S. defense and economics adds another intricate layer. The stakes include not just economic ramifications but also national security concerns. What if the military logistics faced interruptions? A potential blockade could haunt supply chains and military readiness. In this gripping narrative of power and stakes, can the two nations find common ground, or are we on the brink of a considerable trade abyss? Thus unfolds a complex saga. As British Columbia contemplates tolls on American trucks, can the U.S. afford to remain indifferent? Will tariffs lead to increased costs that push Alaskan goods into turmoil? As this conflict crescendos, we are left with a burning question. Are these barriers the beginning of a calamitous trade war? Or will cooler heads prevail to navigate these treacherous waters? Only time will tell. Trade tensions between Canada and the United States have reached a critical juncture. Rumors are swirling that British Columbia's leader is set to impose tariffs on goods headed to Alaska. But could Canada really enforce such drastic measures, or is this merely a strategic bluff? The impact of this decision could ignite a fierce economic battle that neither country is truly prepared for. President Donald Trump has been aggressive, publicly threatening to box Canada into a corner, but Canada is responding with equal fervor. With staunch declarations emerging from Vancouver and various provincial governments, it begs the question, is this a genuine retaliatory strategy, or just empty posturing? While Trump appears oblivious to the reality that Alaska, a U.S. state geographically isolated from the mainland, relies heavily on Canadian routes for access, Canada is gearing up for a fight. Thousands of kilometers of travel, beginning in the state of Washington and traversing through Canada, lead directly to Alaska. This journey is almost impossible without utilizing Canadian highways. In a serious show of force, the Canadian government has issued stern warnings, stating, "We will impose taxes or quotas to restrict this traffic." They have vowed to defend their interests vigorously against any United States aggression. Now, with the announcement from British Columbia's leader to enforce additional costs on goods destined for Alaska, both nations are bracing for the fallout. The repercussions are already echoing across North America. Major news outlets, including Newsweek, have confirmed that American freight trucks could soon face new fees at the border. As conversations heat up on social media, a dire question looms large: could Trump's trade war lead to a blockade that harms Alaska? The state's vital connections with the U.S. mainland heavily depend on seamless logistics through Canadian territory. Each year, commercial shipments worth hundreds of millions of dollars transit these routes. A disruption here would inevitably spell significant economic losses for the United States. As tensions escalate, the question remains: how far will Canada go? Are they willing to risk their own economic stability in a high-stakes game of trade supremacy? It's a gamble that could redefine the relationship between these two neighbors for years to come. In recent developments, a contentious trade dispute has emerged between Canada and the United States, intensifying relationships that have already strained under tariffs and trade restrictions. As trade tensions simmer, the question looms: will Canada escalate its responses in ways that could cripple U.S. access to Alaska? British Columbia's leadership is rumored to be contemplating tariffs on American trucks moving goods to Alaska. This maneuver is perceived by many as a reaction to President Trump's tariffs aimed at Canadian agricultural imports and energy exports. The stakes are high, as commercial shipments worth hundreds of millions travel through Canadian territory every year. If Canada follows through on its threats, the U.S. could face severe economic repercussions. Is this tactic merely a strategic play to enhance Canada's negotiating power, or is it a genuine threat to disrupt essential trade routes? While Canada needs the U.S. economically, especially for energy, agriculture, and manufacturing, Canadian leaders assert that Alaska cannot thrive without relying on their territory. This standoff has introduced a new dimension to trade relations. Previous tensions have often revolved around agricultural products and automobiles, but the critical issue affecting U.S. access to Alaska is strikingly sensitive. How will Trump respond? As tensions rise, he recently remarked on the importance of the U.S.-Canada trading relationship, yet it's evident that the geopolitical landscape is shifting, with Canadian provinces now taking brave stances. The relationship between the two nations could face unprecedented challenges. What happens if Canada actually imposes these tariffs and restricts U.S. routes to Alaska? Will American trucks face hefty fees or even worse? The heart of the matter is Alaska's strategic role for the U.S., thanks to its abundant natural resources and military significance. The military infrastructure crucial for operations on the Pacific route heavily relies on seamless supply routes through Canada. If a tariff system is implemented, even military logistics could be impacted. Would this lead to a national security crisis for the U.S.? Moreover, could the disruption extend to vital sectors like tourism? Alaska's economy greatly depends on travelers who must pass through Canada. If trade routes become encumbered by tariffs, the implications could be severe for both the tourism industry and consumers waiting for Alaska's prized seafood shipments. Amidst this brewing storm, the question remains: how far is Canada willing to go in its resistance? Are they playing a high-stakes game of chicken with the United States, or will negotiations pave a way to a more harmonious resolution? As tensions continue to rise, one thing is clear: whatever decision is made will reshape U.S.-Canada relations and may profoundly alter the economic landscape of North America. The clock is ticking, and the next move could change everything. In a striking twist of fate, tensions have reached a boiling point between the United States and Canada, especially over the strategic territory of Alaska. This territory, rich in oil reserves and famed fishing grounds, plays a crucial role in America's defense strategy, housing vital military infrastructures, everything from nuclear submarines to air bases. But with whispers of Canadian tariffs looming, the stakes could get even higher. Imagine the repercussions of Canada imposing tolls on American trucks, a move seen as retaliation against President Trump's aggressive tariff policy. Could this alter the landscape of trade routes essential for Alaska's economy? While a shift may seem improbable, the Canadian government hints at bold steps, suggesting massive increases in road taxes for American vehicles heading to the last frontier. Are they serious, or is this merely a negotiating tactic to regain leverage? This clash could not only rattle the economy, it might threaten national security. The very supply lines that support military logistics could face disruption. What happens when our reliance on speedy highways is challenged by unprecedented tolls? The frequency of this commerce through the Canadian terrain has deep implications. It raises critical questions. Can the U.S. afford to navigate such obstacles? Will President Trump's administration respond with countermeasures? As news circulates about the potential for a toll booth system, uncertainty lingers. Is it just a plan to target U.S. trucks? Or could all vehicles bearing foreign commercial plates become victims of heightened tariffs? The fear is palpable, not just among traders but also among Alaska's political leaders. They are being pushed to voice concerns about the potential ramifications of these tariffs. Could Alaska's future hang in the balance? Alaska's economy relies heavily on tourism, with cruise ships and road travelers essential to its vibrancy. If Canadians impose tariffs on trade, would it sabotage the tourism sector, too? Such developments could lead to significant financial stress on Alaskan communities, which depend on those visitors. As the political chess game unfolds, one can almost hear the echoes of frustrations from both sides. The question remains, can two neighboring nations, seemingly allied, become foes over trade? The answer could hinge on the next moves from both capitals. Will they find common ground to avert a full-blown conflict, or will stubborn pride fuel the flames of this burgeoning trade war? The clock is ticking, and all eyes are on the next dramatic twist in this unfolding saga. A looming tourism disaster threatens to deliver a devastating blow to Alaska's economy. As tensions rise between two bordering nations, one must wonder, how did Canada and the United States become embroiled in such a fierce trade conflict? The recent actions of the Trump administration show a tendency toward protectionism, imposing hefty tariffs on auto parts, steel, and aluminum, triggering swift retaliatory measures from Canada. The ongoing skirmishes over oil and natural gas have intensified, with trade sanctions adding fuel to the fire. Now, the issue surrounding Alaska magnifies these existing tensions. The Canadian perspective shifts focus. Rather than seeking to harm the U.S. economy, they wish to display their own leverage. Have they just played their strongest card against Trump? Will this assertiveness translate into long-term strategy or merely be a temporary show of defiance? This remains an open question. One crucial element of this standoff is the Alcan Highway. Established during World War II, it serves as the vital artery connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States via Canada. Could imposing steep taxes effectively restrict access through this critical logistic route? While many believe this conflict may not escalate dramatically, the underlying stakes are too high for complacency. Both nations have significant interests to protect, yet the extent of concessions from the Trump administration remains uncertain. Should a deal fail to materialize, British Columbia could very well impose tariffs. This would mean that American freight trucks making their way to Alaska would find themselves facing enormous fees at the border. Picture the chaos if shippers and traders respond aggressively. Added to this scenario is the fact that oil and seafood products from Alaska often travel to other states. If these shipments face increased costs while passing through Canada, how will this shift impact consumer prices across the country? In a dramatic twist of trade relations, the escalating tensions between Canada and the United States have reached a boiling point, threatening both economies in ways that are almost unfathomable. As Washington tightens its grip with heavy tariffs, Canada is pushing back with a surprising counteroffensive. What happens when the very road to Alaska, the lifeline for American commerce, is threatened? Recent reports have revealed alarming news. The leader of British Columbia is poised to impose tariffs on American trucks heading to Alaska. This bold move sends ripples through trade channels as President Trump doubles down on his stance, asserting that aggressive tariffs will continue. As drivers roll through the rugged Canadian terrain on their way to Alaska, they could soon find themselves facing steep tolls at the border. Can you hear it? The crunch of tires on gravel mixed with the murmur of uncertainty amid traders and shippers as costs escalate. The reality is striking. If these additional charges attach themselves to every shipment of Alaska's renowned seafood making its journey to Seattle or Portland, it won't be long before consumers feel the pinch. Imagine biting into salmon that now costs more due to the tariffs levied on trucks traversing Canadian roads. But will the Trump administration cave under the economic pressure from Alaska? As British Columbia's leader stands firm, their message echoes powerfully: if the U.S. threatens us with tariffs, we will retaliate by complicating their access to Alaska. This posture resonates with the political landscape in Ottawa, where the Trudeau government faces mounting pressure from citizens advocating for their trade interests. The sentiment is palpable: Canada isn't going to roll over this time. However, the stakes are high. Restricting a trade route worth billions could backfire. Vehicles crossing into Alaska from the U.S. aren't merely passing through, they fuel the Canadian economy through spending on roads, lodging, and supplies. As threats from the Trump administration loom, the question remains: will the two neighbors find common ground? Or will Canada's bold maneuver ignite a trade war that neither side can control? The shadows of previous crises, the disputes over agricultural goods, steel, and lumber, lingers in the air. Yet, this time, the geographical interdependence of the U.S. and Canada has reached a critical threshold, with the Alaskan corridor at the center of it all. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the potential fallout of this trade spat, where every decision carries profound consequences. Will we see alliances form, or will escalations push both countries into uncharted waters? The turning point in this colossal economic chess game might just be around the corner. Tensions are rising between Canada and the United States, igniting a fierce trade dispute. With Washington imposing tough tariffs and Ottawa retaliating over the critical Alaskan route, both nations find themselves at a crossroads. As the U.S. escalates its trade pressure, claiming Canada is unnecessary, Canada fights back, asserting that Alaska's survival hinges on its cooperation. Could British Columbia truly impose tariffs on U.S. trucks en route to Alaska? Reports indicate that British Columbia's leader is ready to raise tariffs, threatening a vital pathway for U.S. goods. This scenario is alarming for many in Washington as President Trump faces growing dissent over his approach to trade. The president recently hinted at new tariffs on agricultural and lumber products from Canada, leaving many wondering what Canada's response will be. Imagine this: the lumber you need for your home, the dairy you buy for your family, could they all become pricier? Canada's retorts claim that without its land, Alaska is isolated and vulnerable. This conflict could shift the dynamics of trade, opening a new battleground steeped in economic and political stakes. Could this showdown turn into one of the most significant economic wars in recent history? As Washington and Ottawa stare each other down, whispers of retaliation flood the air. Reports confirm that British Columbia is actually considering levying tolls on American trucks crossing its territory. Is this merely a tactical bluff, or is Canada ready to take drastic measures? The implications are massive. Over hundreds of millions of dollars worth of goods flow through Canadian roads to Alaska every year. Slowing this transport could wreak havoc on both sides, leading to massive economic damage. The reality is that many Americans rely on Canadian routes for supplies, making this conflict not just an economic gamble but a potential national security issue. As the stakes rise, the tension between the two nations could escalate, entangling their futures. The leader of British Columbia has signaled that serious tolls on U.S. trucks are on the table, a retaliation aimed directly at Trump's aggressive tariff threats. This move could provoke a backlash, not just economically, but also politically, as Alaskan lawmakers scramble to respond. The potential closure or significant taxation of critical routes raises the horrifying specter of isolated supply lines, leading to skyrocketing prices for everyday necessities in Alaska as winter looms. Decisions made today by both countries could resonate for generations, transforming the landscape of North American trade. In a shocking twist, this could fall into a larger narrative: who truly holds the power in trade negotiations? Can Canada use its geographical leverage to assert its independence from the U.S., or will it bow to mounting pressures? As the air crackles with tension, the world watches closely. Will diplomacy prevail, or is a trade war inevitable? Trade friction between Canada and the United States has reached a boiling point. The ongoing disputes over tariffs and control over vital trade routes have sparked a fierce debate. In this high-stakes game, President Trump asserts that America doesn't need Canada, while Canadian leaders counter with the assertion that Alaska relies heavily on Canadian territory for access. But how serious are these claims? Earlier discussions revealed that the leader of British Columbia is considering imposing tariffs on trucks traveling to Alaska, a move that sent shockwaves through Washington. Could the Canadian government really take such a drastic step? The implications would not just be economic but also geopolitical. The potential for escalating tensions looms large. With Trump threatening tariffs on Canadian dairy and lumber, the risks are multiplying. As the dialogue intensifies, Canada is responding fiercely. They've stated, "We won't let attempts to undermine our interests go unanswered." Northern territories become critical when President Trump's tariffs threaten essential trade pathways. Could cutting off routes to Alaska spark an economic war unlike anything seen before? Reports suggest the British Columbia government plans to introduce tolls for U.S. trucks crossing into Alaska, a significant financial burden. Major news outlets have confirmed these developments, igniting debates about the potential fallout. Should the transportation network slow, American businesses could feel the burn. Loss of revenue runs into billions annually. The heart of the matter boils down to, are these tariffs a genuine threat? Or mere posturing in a game of political chess? Strategically, Alaska's links to the continental U.S. depend heavily on its connections through Canada. Could Canada's insistence on heightened tolls bring Washington to its knees, or is it merely a temporary tactic? With the thick winter air and icy landscapes of Alaska framing the conflict, both nations brace themselves. Could a spat of economic warfare truly destabilize not just trade but also national security? Alaska's vital resources and strategic positioning make this an issue far beyond simple tariffs and trade agreements. As tensions reach a fever pitch, both countries stand at the edge of a precipice. Will Canada launch into uncharted territory by blocking U.S. access to Alaska? Or is this an empty threat that will dissolve in the near future? The critical question remains, how will this conflict be resolved? We are left waiting for answers, with the destinies of two neighboring nations hanging in the balance. Can a peace table reignite cooperation, or are we on the brink of a full-blown trade war? The world watches, holding its breath, as the stakes have never been higher. What lies ahead in this intricate negotiation game? Only time will reveal the true path forward. Stay tuned.